John, I don't know if you know this, but I am a child of the 80s. I was born all the way back in 1985. Having said that, I didn't really grow up at the arcades. I was too young for that, and there was really no arcade scene around me at the time. But over the years, you kind of build up a knowledge of a bunch of classic arcade games and end up playing a bunch. But you, I believe, are a 90s kid. How familiar are you with the 80s arcade scene?
I've become more familiar in recent years because there's a lot of like barcades around London that I sometimes go to with friends, and
Hmm.
they have a lot of 80s arcade machines. But growing up, we didn't even really have 90s arcade machines. We had like a bowling alley, which had like DDR, and then just your average like punch the boxing thing games. Like
Oh, yeah.
not that many actual video games there. So like Time Crisis and that I played, but now a lot of this stuff is more recent exposure.
Yeah, that's sort of how I am because I would go to the boardwalk with my family every summer, and they'd have like little arcade steps there. But a lot of it was like ticket based,
Mm.
so little games in order to get tickets in order to receive
Yeah.
prizes. And you get a few other games in there, like Time Crisis was always one. DDR was there, but Time Crisis was expensive. Wasn't it like $1 or 50 cents per play? And it's like
Yeah.
I didn't know if I wanted to do that, and I wasn't super into fighting games. But where I gravitated towards, but this is still 90s, was the beat 'em ups. But 80s didn't have a lot of beat 'em ups. That was a genre that developed over time.
Yeah.
So, but I have played others over time, and a lot of these games that have made the top 10 for the 80s has you've heard of all these games
Yeah.
for
You've
sure.
certainly played them in places that aren't the arcade, I'm sure, for
Yes.
most of them.
Yeah, there's been a lot of ports of arcade games. Have you played the original arcade version? Maybe those get ports now too.
Mm.
So, especially with the Arcade Archives
Yeah.
collection, a lot of these are available. And there's a lot of 80s arcade games I never even heard of that came up on here. So a lot of them I was aware of, but others, nope, had no idea what that was. Um, so let's say we get into it, just for get our base stats out there. Total of 250 votes this time around, so more than DOS,
Oh,
which honestly surprised me.
yeah, a little bit.
Uh, Less variety than DOS though, with 205 games.
Hmm. Okay.
So yeah, not a huge pool of games, but I mean that makes sense. I don't think arcades exploded until the 90s when the fighting game boom happened, and everybody was just tossing out games.
Yeah.
But yeah, so let's get right to it. John, do you have any idea what the number 10 80s arcade game of all time is?
Okay, let's go. I don't know if people associate this more with Atari, but Defender.
Defender. Good choice. Did not make the top 10. At
Okay.
number 10, Bubble Bobble.
Okay, that was what I was thinking too. I think, yeah, Defender's something that you more associate with 2600, I'd say. But yeah, Bubble Bubble.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool one.
I it took me a while to get to Bubble Bobble. It was a friend of mine actually that was like, "Hey, check this out." We did two player, and that's a game. I think that was the console version. I don't know how different the arcade version is of Bubble Bobble, uh, but it's addictive. But it also is like, oh god, this goes on forever.
Yeah.
It's like it's one of those. It's like, how do you? When does it end? But
There's an arcade place in London, and Bubble Bobble for some reason's in the bathroom. So like it's got all these arcade machines on the floor,
what the?
but you can only play Bubble Bobble if you're in the bathroom. And so like, you don't really want to stick around and play it for that long. But when you get a chance to play it, it's pretty cool. But you also don't want to be like moseying around there much.
I don't think you would. No. Uh, yeah. It's such a simple concept too. Just your two little dragon boys, and you're shooting out bubbles to take care of all the enemies, and then you knock them out. It's. I think that's the cool thing about 80s arcade games. It's the simplicity of
Mm,
them. It's part of it. Me doesn't get too addicted to them anymore, just because I like games that have an endpoint that I can try to reach. Going
yeah.
for points never was addictive to me, but I understand the concept back in the day of like this is simple, easy, pop it in. Uh, let's see what we can pull off or how far we can get.
Yeah.
Um, but
Both
yeah,
both
Bubble
Natalie
Bop.
and Jason are saying the music's great, and like that is a very big thing. Like if you're on a arcade show floor, you hear that music, you're gonna gravitate to Dig Dug. You know that's Dig Dug. And there's so many different arcade machines just trying to get your attention, but that little tune is always gonna drag you in.
You kind of forget how much the music of a game of the arcade games really did matter because
Yeah.
that's how they draw you in. You have to have really cool like marquee and interesting music coming out of it in order to go gravitate towards it.
Yeah.
That's why it's weird to think about the Japanese arcade scene where they didn't have those distinct uh, arcade cabinets. It was always like more generic that they
Yeah.
could easily swap stuff out with.
For sure.
So, but Bubble Bobble, great choice. I don't. I think it deserves to be here in the top 10. So great to see it get some representation. 278 points is what it got to. It beat out number 11 by 2 points.
Oh,
So it was close there. But yeah, let's move on with number 9. John, what is the number 9 80s arcade game of all time?
Maybe this should be higher, and maybe it will be higher. But Dig Dug.
Dig Dug. Good choice. I can confirm that it has made the top 10,
Nice.
but it is not number 9.
Okay.
I'm going to help you out a little bit here because there's a wide breadth that you can choose from. At number 9, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Oh, wait, you're British. Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles.
I didn't know what you were saying for a second there. I was so lost.
This is my childhood. I had the NES version, but I distinctly remember there was we were going on a trip down to Florida, and we had to stay at a hotel, and the hotel happened to have this game in the lobby area. And I knew it from the NES version. I saw the arcade ones. It's so like, oh my gosh, it's so pretty. I want to play this. So I begged for quarters and played through a good chunk of that game, and it's good. I actually kind of like the NES version better, but this is like a classic beat 'em up.
Yeah. Is this one of the first like licensed arcade machines you remember?
I think so. The only one I can think of that might be earlier is like Star Wars.
Yeah.
Star Popeye
had one too.
I think so.
Yeah. But yeah, this, as a kid,
wasn't too often you have license.
You see some turtles on a machine, you're going to be playing that.
Oh yeah, especially because it was 4-player.
Yeah,
that was. I'm trying to think of other arcade games at the time that had 4-player action. No, I can't think of any.
I can't think of many. No.
And from the 80s, no. So that was always a big deal.
Yeah.
Sure. And yeah, the NES version added a bunch of not a bunch, but a couple extra levels, kind of extended a bit, which was good. And it definitely is challenging. I like that this got some recognition because I think Turtles in Time like really takes away, like nobody talks about this game because there's always Turtles in Time, which is objectively the better game. But
right.
Yeah.
But it's still it has its moment in time. It's nice to see it recognized.
Yeah. Before we move on, favorite turtle?
I go back and forth so much. I wanna choose Ash's dad, but I know I can't take that one. Who's your favorite?
I've always, I mean, I think as a little kid, you always gravitate towards Michelangelo, but as I got older, I went Donatello.
Yeah, I might be a Don man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Donnie's gone up in estimation as time's gone on.
Yeah. I go back and forth though. I like all the turtles. They've got their own little quirks.
Oh yeah, for sure. But yeah. Number 9, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles with 371 points.
Nice.
Beating out Bubble Bobble pretty handily. However, number 8 only beat out Turtles by 3 points.
Oh.
So, yeah. So, John, what is the number 8 80s arcade game of all time?
I want to say Joust, but I don't know if Joust is that well known anymore. Because Balloon Fight kind of copied it.
I guess that's true.
Let's say, okay, not Joust. I'm going to go with... There's probably multiple Pac-Mans and multiple Donkey Kongs. So I'll say Donkey Kong Jr. here.
Well, John, you have the right company, but not the right game. At number 8,
Punch-Out.
Mario Brothers.
Oh, okay. All right, Mario Brothers.
I'm actually a little surprised. Mario Brothers is I'm both surprised but also not, because Mario Brothers is fine, but it's not where I go to when I think arcade games.
No, It's Nintendo when they started porting their arcade games to the NES, they missed a few features. Like the arcade version of Mario Brothers has little cutscenes at the start of each round. There's like new animations, like turtles getting back into their shell. So it felt a bit more like a premiere experience going to the arcade for this. That said, though, it's still just as rigid as the NES version is. Um,
It's hard to go back to.
yeah, I really love Mario Brothers on the GBA. I love the classic series version, like the other NES ports. But yeah, this one not my favorite.
Not mine either. It has its historical importance for sure,
Yeah.
but I think the reason it did so well is because Nintendo has pushed this game like crazy.
Mm.
Just think to the Game Boy Advance line. Every version, every Mario game on the Game Boy Advance had Mario Brothers
Yeah.
with it, so you could link up and play with each other.
Yeah. I mean,
So,
yeah, it's important. This is where we spend all our coins stomping Koopas.
oh, they're not Koopas, they're shell creepers. I've seen a lot of people like I don't know about Mario Brothers in the top 10, but that's the thing. There's always a lot of discussion about how these ranks full out. It's like, do you go with the one with the most merit? Like, which is the universally recognized best? But I don't, and that is that there is, obviously value in that, but how do you argue what is
Right.
best?
Exactly.
And unfortunately, not unfortunately, but just the way these sort of things work out, popularity can help boost a game recognition. And I think to me, this whole thing has sort of become a way of sort of like, hey, preservation helps. Look at
Yeah.
how much preservation and actually putting out your series helps recognition that people know these games, can learn to love your games, and they can go up in estimation, so they're more widely known and beloved.
Mm.
So if you do that, like Bubble Bobble does, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle does, Mario Brothers does, you can do pretty well.
Yeah.
So, yep. But yeah, fun game. Maybe not top 10 for a lot of people, but a fun game.
Yeah.
All right. John, what is our number 7 game of all time? Beating out Mario Brothers by a little less than 20 points.
I'm gonna go with I wouldn't necessarily put this in the top 10 myself, but I think popularity might win out. The arcade version of Tetris.
Ah. I can tell you right now that Tetris did not make the top 10.
It's not the best version, but it's a machine I see quite a lot out there.
I don't think I've ever seen it.
Oh.
That's the weird thing about it. I believe it was out there, but it didn't come to mind. I was like, oh yeah, I guess Tetris did get an arcade version. No, instead at number 7 with 396 points, Frogger.
I was thinking Frogger. I said don't say Frogger now because Frogger deserves to be higher up, but no, he's here. Okay, that's great. Froggers are just a stone cold classic. Frogger's still so fun to play.
Oh yeah,
there's a lot of games from this era that have like a ton of rules, and it's hard to wrap your head around. But Frogger's you just jump from lily pad to lily pad, avoid the cars, endless.
Get your timing ready,
Yeah.
and yeah, I never played it in the arcade, but when my family got their Tandy computer back in the day, it had a copy of Frogger, and that's how I experienced it. And I'd play that a lot.
Yeah.
I go back to it like it's so simple but addictive. You have your frogs, you're trying to get them across the street, get them across the pond, get them into their spot, and you're golden. And the way that it ramps up with the alligators, changing up how the traffic works, it really sucked you in.
Yeah. I don't know how many people today know Frogger, but I know there's so many smartphone games that are just Frogger. Like a lot of ones have gone viral, and it's literally just tap at the right time to avoid vehicles. That is what Frogger is. So its legacy is for sure lived on, even if it's not necessarily Frogger that has.
That's true. I mean, as Natalie points out, Seinfeld did sort of immortalize Frogger with in the arcade game specifically with that one episode. Even recreated the crossing traffic thing with George, which was honestly funny. So there is that aspect, that cultural relevancy. And I actually picked up the first 3D Frogger game that came out on. It was, I think it was on PS1 as well, but on PC it was like a 3D one that sort of followed the same idea, but just changed up what the levels were. I remember there would be like sky levels that you're trying to cross with
Oh,
clouds at different elevations. It was like, oh, okay. But it kept the basic idea of Frogger. It didn't turn into a platformer like the later games, which
mhm.
is cursed Frogger. Oh, Press played. Jason's mom is actually obsessed with Frogger. Yeah, it's funny with that. I think everybody has a parent where they had that
Yeah.
one arcade game they're just really into.
Yeah, I think my mum loved Frogger too, but she also loved playing Tetris on this like 31 in one calculator game thing. I had a
Oh,
bunch of trash games and then Tetris, and my mum used to always take the calculator and play on that.
sounds about right. But yeah, it's Stone Cold classic. I'm glad Frogger made it in here.
Yeah,
It's a nice choice.
for sure.
But yeah, let's get up to number 6, which actually beat out Frogger by a solid 150 points.
Wow.
So a
Well,
bit of a jump up.
we know Dig Dug is on here somewhere. I don't know
Mhm.
if this is Dig Dug's spot. This might be Gallagher's spot though.
It is not Galaga's spot.
Okay.
It is Outrun's spot.
Oh, okay. I was thinking like
Yeah.
what Sega games could have made it here, but my mind wasn't picking up on any. But no, Outrun. Yeah, makes
Yeah.
sense.
Sega has a really good run in the 80s with their arcade games. And man, Yakuza does a great job of preserving those arcade
Oh yeah,
games.
yeah.
Because I honestly, I don't think I ever played Outrun before, but I played Yakuza 0 not too long ago, and Outrun is one of the arcade games there, and it's a lot of fun. It's hard, but it is addictive and has a lot of variety because of the different paths you can take.
Yeah, perfect arcade games. I'm just trying to get that last time and extend it. I've never seen an Outrun 1 arcade machine. I've seen plenty of
No,
Outrun 2s, but never Outrun 1 in the wild.
I it is nerve wracking because you see the time ticking down. You're trying to get to that next checkpoint. You're
Mm,
like, oh god, I gotta make it. Oh god, I gotta make it. And then you get into that wreck and then you go flying and flipping.
yeah,
It's pretty immersive for an arcade game at
it
that
is.
time.
It absolutely is. All the console ports are great too, like whether it's on Mega Drive or the Sega Ages version is amazing. It's like silky smooth. You get
Mm.
widescreen. That's just a and there's
Ooh.
the 3DS version with 3D as well. That's a really cool one
Oh, I
too.
bet that looks really cool in
Yeah,
3D, honestly.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
Pirate, that's Caitlin says I bought Outrun on the eShop for $3. Super worth it. Yeah, it is. Whenever it goes on sale, just
Yeah.
grab it up.
Yeah. I need to play more Outrun games because
Mm.
I assume they're all better. I think one of the more modern Outruns was still considered really good, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean Outrun 2 is pretty much the last one. But yeah,
Oh, okay.
it's great though. It's like one of the best arcade races there is.
Sega, you're reviving all these franchises. We're missing out on like the burnout's not really a thing as much anymore. Need for Speed is trying to come back, but it's
Yeah,
EA. Bring back Outrun.
yeah.
Let's get Outrun in here.
I would love it.
All right. Top 5.
So
John,
we've not had Pac Man, we've not had Donkey Kong, we've not had Galaga, we've not had Dig Dug. Um, okay. I feel like Miss Pac Man might be there alongside Pac Man because it's better than Pac Man. But I don't think it's going to win. I'll say Miss Pac Man here.
at number 5, beating out Outrun by 50 points, Dig Dug.
Dig Dug. He
So
deserves it
that's where
here.
Dig Dug is.
He deserves to
Yeah.
be here.
Believe it or not, I've never played Dig Dug.
Oh. You have like
Yeah.
a Namco museum of some kind somewhere, though, right?
No, I never bought a Namco museum. And I think that's why I always missed out on it because I was at
Oh,
the time, I was like, I don't know if I want these old arcade games. It was more like if they're additions to a game I already had is how I encountered some of these.
yeah.
A lot of more modern ones. But I've seen Dig Dug be played, and it's certainly it feels like a thoughtful arcade game
Mm,
more than most,
yeah.
just because you got to watch where you're digging.
There's a lot of strategy to it. It's almost like a reverse platform in a way. Like there's a lot of thought that goes into Dig Dug. It's not necessarily like just about clearing the stage all the time, like in the way that Pac-Man is, I suppose. It's like a mix of objective and strategic score building. That kind of makes it just sort of endlessly playable.
Yeah. How did they increase the difficulty? Was it just more enemies or more rocks? Because I know you
Yeah,
could set up so that the rocks would fall onto the enemies and get you extra points. It wasn't just sticking the hose in them and blowing them up.
yeah, right. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Exactly what you said.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I can see how that would be addictive. I just, for whatever reason, never really played it. And I know everybody was talking like I think I first heard about Dig Dug when everybody was talking about Mr. Driller in the old PlayStation
Right.
magazines. And I never played Mr. Driller either. So I'm just sort of this digging genre. I just keep missing out on somehow.
You know, have you played SteamWorld Dig? Have you played any dig games?
No.
Derek just can't
So
dig.
I just don't dig. I just don't dig. I don't know what it is, but I don't dig. But I get the love for Dig Dug. I totally understand it,
Yeah,
but
it's
I just
another
never
one of
played it.
those like you hear the music and you just gravitate to the machine. It's just
Oh
instantly
yeah.
recognizable.
There's a interesting video from a good friend of mine, Golden Bolt, talking about the later Dig Dug games and how like apparently the original Dig Dug becomes like a absentee father, like a terrible dad
I
figure
have
to
not
later
kept up
Dig
with the
Dug.
Dig Dug lore. Like, how did we
Apparently,
get
there's
here?
some weird Dig Dug lore as the games go on. And if you're curious to Dig Dug at all, check out his video. It's so weird.
All right.
What are you doing? What are you doing with this character, Namco? What are you doing? Well, let's get to number 4. John, can
Huh.
you predict what number 4 was? Beating out Dig Dug by 300 points.
Was Miss Pac-Man on the list at all, or is that a throwaway?
I can confirm that you have said every single remaining
So
game.
Miss Pac-Man isn't here. Interesting.
Uh,
Okay. Unless
no, no, you've
oh, I
mentioned
said
it.
that. Oh,
So
sorry.
yeah, since
Misinterpreted.
you every game you've in the remaining 4, you have said verbally at some
Okay.
point.
So this is Galaga.
Number 4, correct.
Okay.
Galaga.
Nice. It's a good one. I think I find Space Invaders a lot more fast paced than Galaga. I like just that. That's just like go straight into it. They're all there. Just shoot at them. Um,
I never
Galaga's
thought about that, but you're right.
yeah, like Galaga's. You got to wait for the waves to come up. You've got if you got like very small windows, like very small cooldowns for your shots. So you got to be accurate. And I like it, but I think Space Invaders is my preferred shooting space game.
That's interesting. I always felt like Galaga was a little bit more advanced than Space Invaders, but I get
Yeah,
what you mean, where it's a bit more immediate, and there's a little bit more strategy with Space Invaders because of the whole cover system. But there's also that timing element where they're coming down. You got to take them out before they get down to you. So be
yeah.
quick about it. Very much in that, like it's interesting to see the shooter evolve from Space Invaders because there was a bunch of Space Invaders clones, and then you finally got the games that sort of evolved it a little bit,
Yeah,
like your Centipedes, your Galaga, your eventually, I think probably Xevious to a degree,
sure.
which is how you get your scrolling shooters, and eventually get into the bullet hells.
Yeah. And as Caitlin says, you can upgrade your ship in Galaga. You can get like more shots. So that sort of slower immediacy I was talking about, you can change if you play well. So it's there's cool strategy like that. You can keep building, and it is very addictive to keep going back and back again. I
Mhm.
don't want to diminish it. I think Galaga's great, but like I think Space Invaders is just like a little bit higher for me.
Yeah, I can see that. I imagine other people are also like, oh, Galaga's great, but I prefer Galaxian. I've never
Sure.
played
Yeah.
Galaxian, but it's one of those things where certain people love the sequels more, but more people know the originals. I don't know if that's the case here, but I mean, Galaga's a classic. It's honestly kind of weird it hasn't come back in any real way other than cameos.
Yeah, there's not really been like I don't want to speak definitively, but from my experience, there's not really been like a better version of Galaga. Like there are sequels and things that build upon it, but that original arcade Galaga is just still kind of the go-to one for me, at least.
It's a wonder that Namco hasn't done. I They haven't really done
Like
the
a
Pac-Man
like a championship
Championship
edition.
Edition with their other arcade games. I feel
Yeah,
like that could really get people into some of their other arcade classics.
yeah,
Like a Galaga like Championship Edition, that'd be pretty wild.
it'd be awesome. Yeah,
I also wonder if a lot of people checked out Galaga because of Avengers back in the day.
maybe.
Got that pretty notable line.
Mm.
I mean, apparently it increased the sales of shawarma just because of that end scene. So Adventures was that cultural touchstone. So it wouldn't surprise me if people are like Galaga or hey, I remember Galaga. I'm going to check it out, play that again after all this time.
Yeah.
But yeah, solid choice. I think it definitely deserves to be in the 80s arcade, top 80s arcade games. But yeah. All right. John, what is the number 3 arcade game of all time?
I think that this is Donkey Kong.
It is not Donkey Kong.
Is it Miss Pac-Man?
This is Miss Pac-Man.
Yeah.
So with 950 votes, beating out Galaga by 40 points. It is weird getting into the actual history of Miss Pac-Man because there was a lot of votes for other Pac-Man games over the years, but none of them got as high as Miss Pac-Man and obviously the main one. But Namco put out Pac-Mania, Super Pac-Man, Professor Pac-Man, Junior Pac-Man, Baby Pac-Man.
Yeah, there's a lot out there.
Who remembers those? Nobody really knows about those, but they know Miss Pac-Man, which was a unofficial American commission sequel that a lot of people consider better than the original.
I mean, as Caitlin says, it's a ROM hack, pretty much. It's pretty much just Pac-Man reskinned and redone. But I prefer it. I think this one has the more interesting mazes. It's mechanically a bit more interesting. And if I get the choice between Pac-Man and Miss Pac-Man, I think I'll always choose Miss Pac-Man.
Same.
But there's also problems today where they just can't re-release it because was it At Games who had the rights and then
I don't know, but you're right in that they couldn't even use her for the Pac-Man.
Pac-Mum now.
It's Pac-Mom, which feels wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Then I think the last release was on PS4 because I got Platinum in Miss Pac-Man. I think that's the last time it got re-released, and then the rights got really weird. But yeah, Namco can't distribute Miss Pac-Man games. They have to replace her and just pretend she doesn't exist.
Yeah, or it sucks because that also means that unless they change the character, Miss Pac-Man got her own PS1 game.
She did.
She had that Maze Madness.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know. It's a weird situation. It is a better game, I'd say. But that rights holding, it's weird. It's a strange situation.
It's not as iconic either. Like you think arcades, I think you think Pac-Man.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, whereas Miss Pac-Man's always like that other one. It may be the better one, but it's also like it's not the one everyone thinks about.
Yeah. It's like it's does At Games do anything with Miss Pac-Man?
They just do their own little clone consoles every now and then, don't they? I don't know if they do anything with Miss Pac-Man though. I have no idea.
You'd think Namco would just buy the rights.
You would think so. Or maybe they're kind of ashamed of Miss Pac-Man because it's not technically,
it's not theirs.
Yeah.
Oh no! It's like, oh, we didn't make this, and nobody cared about all the other Pac-Man things we put out. Yeah. So, no, that's a shame. But it's I think I had Miss Pac-Man on NES. Is how I played it, and yeah, you could just tell. You could just feel the quality somehow.
Yeah. And I forget my first place that I played Miss Pac-Man. I can't recall. I've got it on Mega Drive. That might be my first one.
That makes sense. I can see that. But yeah, hard to argue. It's a great game. Yeah. But all right, John. Number 2. What's our number 2 game of all time?
It's between DK and Pac-Man. What would our audience do? You've got to get into their minds sometimes. Where are you guys? What are you doing in your own little cave over there? Are you going for Pac-Man?
I do my best to escape my audience by having people like do the repost thing on Bluesky, but I don't know how far. You never know how far it really reaches.
Yeah. I think our audience associates the arcade with Pac-Man. I don't think they associate it all with Donkey Kong. Pac-Man is like a global sensation. Everyone knows him. And when you think Pac-Man, you think arcade. When you think Donkey Kong, I think there's more things that come to mind. And I don't think DK is the best arcade game ever, at least in the 80s. I think Pac-Man takes it. So I'm going to say number 2 is DK.
Number 2, Donkey Kong,
Okay.
with 1,022 points, beating out Miss Pac-Man by 70.
It is a surprise
So,
that DK Jr. didn't make it as well.
yeah, I'm actually very surprised that Donkey Kong Jr. didn't put in a better showing, but
Yeah.
no, it's just pure Donkey Kong. And I mean, it's hard to argue. It was a cultural touchstone. I
Yeah.
mean, it had its own documentary with the liar Billy Mitchell.
Caitlin, DK Jr. does not suck. No.
No, I think as a kid, I actually enjoyed Donkey Kong Jr. a little bit more. I had the Donkey Kong Classics collection on NES.
Yeah.
So we had both 1 and 2. But for the original Donkey Kong, that's how I experienced it. I would play that version, but I never realized it was missing a level for on NES. So I never actually played that 4th level until I played Donkey Kong 64.
Right, because that was like the most arcade accurate version of that point on any ported system.
Yeah,
and it stayed that way for years because we didn't get the arcade version until Switch. Before that, DK64 was as close to arcade as we got.
Yeah, you're right. It's such a weird fact, but it's so funny hearing so many people that play Donkey Kong 64. The fact that you have to beat those 4 levels in order to get 100% or 101% in that game, and it's so frustrating to people. And I was like, I mean, maybe because I grew up old school, but I beat it in no time. Like it took me. It's hard, but it's not like super hard.
Yeah. Well, once you understand the patterns of Donkey Kong, that first run is pretty easy. Like I can do that I guess the third level. Where does the cake one go? Is that the second level?
I see the second or third. I can't remember.
I think it's the second. Yeah. But that third, technically second level, whatever you want to call it, I think you can just do that without even thinking. Like you can just climb up the scaffolding, jump off, avoid the little springy things that come down. It becomes second nature. It gets a bit more unpredictable on a second and a third run. Like that's when Donkey Kong really gets its challenge.
Oh, they ramp it up.
Yeah. For me personally, I love arcade games that just kind of keep going. I like that sort of endless loop. Donkey Kong kind of has a beginning and an end. And you keep playing, it gets harder. But for me personally, I agree with the ranking of number 1 being something else because like as great as this is, I don't know if it encapsulates exactly what makes arcade great. And this kind of feels like a middle ground between like a home console game and an arcade game.
Yeah, I always see a lot of people talking about how this is like notable at the time for having one of the first stories in video games. It's it's a super simple story, but I mean, you're actually getting cutscenes showing it all off. You see how the level gets formed in that very first one.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's notable for that, and it definitely has an addictive quality. And if you want to have, I think if you want to have a challenge, especially seeing those levels get harder and harder, in a ways, it's sort of the precursor to a lot of NES games where you beat like Super Mario Brothers or The Legend of Zelda. It's like, now you can try hard mode.
Right. If you've played Donkey Kong only on NES, I don't think you've really experienced what the arcade one is.
No,
because that's pretty easy on NES. Like it ramps up, but not anywhere near as much. You try it in arcade, and like it's just ridiculously hard on that second try immediately.
Once you try that out, the I forget. Unfortunately, I always remember Billy Mitchell. I forget who he's raced against that did do it legit. You see what those later levels are like, and it's like, good God, how do they do this? It is so tough.
Yeah, it's wild. It's a different kind of play style too. Like you can either point farm, like just jumping over the barrels, getting the hammer, or just go straight to clearing the level. I tend to just sort of clear the level. I don't do too much just jumping about. Yeah.
It gets a little, I feel like it gets a little too erratic that it makes it harder to get to the end if I take too much time. Plus they do have a way of forcing you to go forward with the fire barrel at the bottom that keeps pushing you. So it made sense to me just go as fast as you could. Although I definitely had an experience because I started with Super Mario Brothers,
Mm.
and then I played Donkey Kong on the NES. And I remember getting to that second level, and it's like, oh, I just need to jump down to that platform, jump, land, dead. It's like,
Yeah.
wait, there's fall damage? What the
Yeah.
hell? And then you realize the fall damage is so strict. You cannot fall
It's
that
like a
far. You
floor.
are dead.
It's one floor and then you're dead.
Pretty much. Oh god, it was eye-opening. It made
Yeah.
me really nervous, which I wonder how many people like had that same experience with the original Donkey Kong 94. And
Yeah.
like, oh no, I can't fall, but no, you're fine.
You duck into a roll. I want to talk about it briefly here because it's not in the top 10, but I imagine it'll come up later. But DK Jr. I thought was a really smart sequel.
Mm.
It's really similar. You know, you still got full damage, you still got the same sort of platforming mechanics, but you're a monkey now, so you hold onto vines. It just changes the level design in a great way. I think it's great. Every now and then I hear that it sucks, like Caitlyn over there, but I think it's genuinely a really really good game.
It's amazing how much it keeps the core concepts of the original Donkey Kong,
Yeah,
but has smart changes that makes it interesting to play as the vine climbing and how the fact that you can climb faster with holding two vines if
right.
you're going up, but if you're going down, it's faster. You only hold
And
one
you're a bigger
vine.
target if you hold two. So it's like, do you risk that? Do you risk getting hit on both sides, or do you play it safe and do one? There's a lot of thought process.
Yeah, it's you don't think about it, but it is a smart sequel and also really changes things up on their head that the hero of the first game is now the villain.
Yeah, Mario is just like a horrific villain. He's captured an animal. I think he whips him. He's an awful man.
I mean, to be fair, Donkey Kong did kidnap his girlfriend.
That's true,
It's a
but
little
you don't
he's a little
kidnap back. If
vindictive.
someone kidnaps someone in your family, you don't go, well, I'm going to get back at them and kidnap their dad. You call the police.
That is, get animal control in here. Oh god. All right. Well, I think it's time to talk about our number one 80s arcade game of all time. Um, Not exactly a surprise. Honestly, there's a reason I wanted 80s arcade games in here because it needs to be represented. There's even a term for this. John, why don't you do the honors? At number one,
It is Donkey Kong 3. Oh, here we go.
you knew it. The cultural we stand Stanley the bug keeper.
It's Pac-Man. What kind of makes Pac-Man so special and like infinitely replayable? It's the AI of the ghosts. You have to you can learn them somewhat. You can learn like which one chases you, which one sort of goes off, which one tries to get you in a corner. But you can never quite master them, and that kind of makes it just sort of this perfect run. Just being able to try and think of new like split decisions. Do I take this left turn? Do I take this right turn? Do I wait for the power pellet? It's just a constant game of choices, and every choice you make it's going to come back to you. You know, it's there's a consequence. There's a reward for basically every move you make. It's perfection for the arcade.
I yeah, I can't really say it better than that. I think play Jason puts it perfectly. Pac-Man is addiction incarnate because it is a constant reward feed.
Yeah,
All those pellets, it feels good to get every single pellet. It feels good to get the power pellet, and then you get revenge on the ghosts. You see that fruit pop up in the middle. You'll want to get that fruit, but it might be dangerous. But it might not be the easiest thing. But that's extra points, and but you want that fruit.
yeah.
It is such a good feedback loop of constantly rewarding you, and having that thought process and thinking how you want to just approach it all, and seeing some amazing Pac-Man players and how they handle it all, and how it just gets so fast.
Yeah.
And that's how they challenge you. Is just I don't think that the AI for the ghost changes too much as gets it
Not
gets
really.
harder. Am I
They get
correctly?
faster, and also the power pellets last less time. So if
Yeah.
you get like round like 30, that power pellet's gonna be like a blink. So you've got to sometimes you got to wait next to the pellet for them to approach you, and then nab it, and that's how you get them. But yeah, it can get really tricky.
Yeah, and so it's always it's the same sort of challenges. Everything works the same. It's just going to be faster and faster and faster. How quick can your decision making skills work? How well can you navigate the maze? And that absolutely led to addiction. Like,
Yeah.
um, there there's songs about this. There's the whole Pac-Mania idea around it. Pac-Man fever. It was makes it into movies. What's the iconic line from Scott Pilgrim? When he's trying to pick up Ramona, he's talking about how almost named it Puck-Man.
Yeah. And it's never gotten better than just Pac-Man either. They've built upon it. They've made great other versions, but when you think about like, oh, what's the best way to play just standard Pac-Man? It's like play the arcade version, play the original arcade version. There's brilliant adaptations. We got Pac-Man 99, or we used to have Pac-Man 99. That was great. Championship Edition, one of the best games ever, probably. And then like you just keep going on and on and on like that. There's lots of great Pac-Mans out there, but when you think about just playing standard Pac-Man, this is still the one.
You just always go right back to it, and it's just a pie shape. It's just a pie shape and you got the waka waka waka.
Yeah.
That's like every aspect of this game is iconic. It got its own Hanna-Barbera cartoon series back in the day. That's how popular it was. I never watched the shows consistently myself, but there was always a holiday special where Pac-Man met Santa Claus that I'd watch on Cartoon Network every year because it was there. And it's not a great show, but it's like that's how popular it was. It got an American adaptation. It wasn't like Speed Racer where they brought over a Japanese version. No, American adaptation, which only other games like that they got at least notable ones was like Sonic and Mario. Obviously, they brought on others in the 90s because they were trying to catch that fire, but Mario and Sonic were obviously the most successful ones.
Yeah. Pac-Man hasn't really captured that Mario and Sonic flair like they tried it with Pac-Man World. But I think he's always kind of lived in the 80s, but in an eternal state, though. In a state where you can keep bringing him back and it'll be popular. But he's not exactly... I don't think kids necessarily go like... I don't think they know Pac-Man as well as Mario and Sonic these days. But they still keep him alive in really interesting ways. We've got that Shadow Labyrinth game, which I'm very excited for.
Yeah, same.
The secret, is it secret level? That the Pac-Man episode of that was just, it was the best of all of them. It was really, really good.
I mean, and Namco loves to reference it. I was talking about how I was earlier. I just recently beat Tales of the Abyss, and there's a special island that you can discover called Namco Bandai Island. It's if you put it all together, and it's just full of like cameos from other Namco game, like classic Namco arcade games.
Oh, interesting.
And there's an elevator that you take, and as you take the elevator, it's like it's basically Pac-Man thing where you're just eating the pellets and it's going, the usual sounds.
Maybe I should play Tales of the Abyss. This sounds awesome.
Yeah. Kalino has a little Pac-Man on his hat.
Yeah. It is like funny shell shock that Pac-Land is the Smash stage. There was a proper Pac-Man stage in Smash 3DS, but we're not allowed to have that.
Yeah. It stinks. It's so unfortunate that we got Pac-Land. Like, yeah, it was like an early platformer, but Pac-Man is definitely better. And the 3DS Pac-Man stage was the better one.
Yeah, for sure.
That's such a shame, but that was also a really big deal when Pac-Man got into Smash.
It was huge, yeah. That was at a point where there really weren't that many third-party characters. Like it was like Sonic, it was Snake, it was Mega Man. It's like it still didn't feel quite possible that someone like Pac-Man could get in. But when you think about a game that is a museum of video game history, you can't not have Pac-Man in there.
Oh yeah, and I mean he is the character. So. Yeah, very much well deserved. Beat out Donkey Kong by a solid 100 points, so not even really close.
I'm glad it did. Donkey Kong, great game. It's not number one for 80s arcade, though.
No, I honestly, I think the only thing that could have made maybe deserving of getting into top 10 above it potentially, and I don't think it's more for its legacy than anything else. It would be Space Invaders.
Yeah. I agree.
But fortunately, we have, thanks to the Atari 2600 list, Space Invaders is part of our round of finalists. So I don't feel too bad about it not making.
No.
But yeah, let's quickly go over the games that didn't quite make it to get our top 50 as always. Well, not as always, but now that we started doing that, I was just like, okay, since I always get people asking, well, what else made it? And I try to do my best to accommodate, but I'm not going to go over to all 205 games. So you get top 50 and you'll like it. All right. At number 11, Space Invaders. Missed beating out Bubble Bobble by 2 points.
Do people consider this more a Nokia phone game than arcade?
I don't know.
Maybe they do. Because like this was one, like it was Snake and Space Invaders. Those like the go-to Nokia games.
See, I always associate Space Invaders more with Atari because that's how I first played it.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, Pong is not on this list. I think it's because I said 80s, but I also said it's not in the title, but I did mention that 80s and before.
Yeah.
Since there's arcade games in the 70s, but it wasn't as prevalent. So there's no point in having a 70s focused one. So it's 80s and previous.
Yeah.
But yeah. At number 12, Final Fight.
Oh, okay.
Which, came in at 99. And I think I'd swap Final Fight with Mario Brothers. Yeah. I think because Final Fight is like, it's not the first beat 'em up, but it's like the beat 'em up. It was like the influential beat 'em up that really showed what it could, like what the genre could be all about. Like Turtles took inspiration. Well, actually, I don't know if Turtles took inspiration from Final Fight or not. I think Final Fight actually might have came out afterwards from that.
Well,
but I don't know on that one.
Yeah.
Because Final Fight came out November 25th, 89.
Oh.
And Turtles, let's see here real quick. I gotta, oh gosh. Why is it such a long name? Let's see. Here we go.
Final Fight
came out in October, so it came out a month before. That's so weird that but I feel like Final Fight's the more influential one, even though Turtles came first.
Yeah. I feel like Final Fight was probably in development for longer as well. So you can argue which one had the idea first, but this is just it holds up so incredibly well.
Mm-hmm. I think it's the one that introduced the idea of like items and whatnot. You had very limited, like you could hit like a fire hydrant or hit back a sewer plate.
Yeah.
But you couldn't like pick up items or use weapons, and that's where Final Fight was kind of unique at the time.
It felt interactive.
Mm-hmm. So a little sad that didn't make it on there, but that's how it is for the favorites. At 13, another fantastic one, Space Harrier.
Oh,
I wish Sega got a little bit more representation in the top 10 because they deserve it.
I think you just generally think Mega Drive when you think Sega. They have some great arcade stuff, but a lot of that found its way onto the Mega Drive.
Yeah, I think Space Harrier did pretty well on that, but it just some good arcade ports from Sega. But yeah. At number 14, I did not expect to see this so high. Mappy.
Okay.
Yeah, Mappy. Namco getting some love on this list. That's for
sure.
Namco
on fire in this era. This was their bread and butter. Mappy's cool.
Yeah. I should mention that a lot of these now are going to like only like 5 points apart, 2 points apart. Like Mappy beat out number 15, Punch Out by 2 points.
Punch Out arcade's cool. Like its mechanics came back into Super Punch Out. It's so different to the NES one. I like the Super Meter. That's cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen it. It lacks the personality of NES Punch Out. I think just because Mac is a wireframe, which it's cool, but it's like, it is what it is. Number 16, Dragon's Lair.
Cool.
Which I wondered if it would make the top 10 or not, because it's one of those where it's like it's visually impressive.
Yeah.
Gameplay wise, it is too hard. It is so strict.
Yeah. I've never seen an arcade machine for this out there. I played this on Sega CD. It's cool on there. But I imagine this would be cool in the arcades.
Yeah, definitely stand out compared to everything else. We have this fully animated Don Bluth game.
Yeah.
At number 17, Golden Axe.
Cool. Very cool one as well.
18 is Centipede. 19 is Donkey Kong Jr.
I feel like he should be a bit further up.
You'd think, but where would you put it compared to like these others? Like, would you put it above Punch Out? Would you put it above Mappy?
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know if I'd put it above Space Harrier though.
No, I wouldn't do that either. I'd put it above Punch Out though. Yeah,
Yeah. So you think it probably should have been around 14 instead of
I
19.
think
That's
so.
fair.
Yeah.
At number 20, Tempest,
Okay. Cool.
which I haven't really played a lot of Tempest. 21, Fantasy Zone,
Mm-hmm.
which
Caitlin says 19th
last.
worst game of all time is better spot for DK Jr.
You don't know a lot of bad games then. 22, Xevious.
Okay. Cool. Yeah.
23, Joust. 24, Burger Time.
Mm-hmm.
25, Cubert.
I was thinking
26.
Cubert. I was trying to think of names for the top 10, and Cubert did come to mind, but no, quite a bit further back.
Yeah. I've never played Cubert. I know Cubert, but I've never played him. 26, Tapper,
Okay.
which I kind of forgot about Tapper. I played that was another one on the Tandy I played a lot.
Yeah.
27, Asteroids.
Yeah.
28, Star Wars, the arcade game.
Mm-hmm.
The old vector graphics one. 29 is Strider. 30 is Rampage.
Mm-hmm.
31 versus VS. I don't know. Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah. Okay.
Which okay, that's you got your technicality in there. 32 Robotron 2084.
Mm-hmm.
33 is Crystal. Actually tied at 33. Is Crystal Castles and Tetris.
Okay.
So there's where Tetris got into. 35 Arkanoid.
Okay.
30.
I'm surprised Arkanoid's so far back.
Yeah, it did not get high up. I don't know if people think about Arkanoid that much anymore. That might be the bigger issue. Like, it took me a while to realize Arkanoid was Breakout as well.
Yeah.
Like, it was basically just Breakout. At 36, Double Dragon. 37, Paperboy. 30 tied at 38, Missile Command and Pole Position. At 40 is Gauntlet. Tied at 41 is Contra and Pac-Mania.
Never tried Contra Arcade before.
No, I haven't either. I wonder how different it is. At 43 is Tron. 44 is Gradius. I forgot about we're talking about licensed game arcade games. I forgot about Tron being up there. 44 is Gradius. 45 is Donkey Kong 3. So Stanley gets to represent. 46 is Ghouls and Ghosts. 47 is Afterburner 2. 48 is Shinobi. 49 is 1942. And finally, at number 50, Galaxian.
Whoa, number 50 for Galaxian.
Yeah. So
I'm surprised by a few of those. Joust made it in there. We're talking about Joust at in the beginning. I think Joust deserves to be a bit higher than it was. But I think it's one of those things where its legacy it's kind of left in the 80s.
Yeah, you don't hear about Joust as much. Yeah. I feel like it got a few modern ones, but
I can't think of anything like lately. Maybe Arcade Archives may have had Joust, but in terms of like a brand new Joust game, I can't remember the last one.
No, I can't either. And honestly, I didn't even realize Paperboy was an arcade game. I thought that was just a straight up NES game.
There's a few of those where you think of the console game. Like there's a bunch of Sega and a few Nintendo ones where like I think they're popular because of Mega Drive and NES.
Yeah, I mean the NES when it first started out was basically just an arcade machine. Yeah. Let's get some arcade ports on here that you can play at home that are the closest you've ever gotten.
And that's what Famicom was for like 4 years. Like we didn't get it for a long time, and they didn't have Super Mario Brothers until we got it.
No,
so they were. It was very much like tennis and Donkey Kong and baseball. Like that's most of what it was for a while.
Very basic additions, but did the trick. But yeah, overall, I think a pretty solid list for the arcade.
Yeah, a good showing. It'd be interesting to get to the 90s because that's when a few genres start to explode, like light gun games and fighting games, and I think that's where it gets really interesting. But yeah, there's
90s arcade is going to be very. I mean, really that comes down to is how dominant will Capcom be?
Yeah, yeah.
Because it seems like 80s was Namco, 90s is Capcom.
Yep. I hope my light gun fans show up. We've got House of the Dead. We've got Time Crisis. We can get those in there. But I imagine that fighters will dominate.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I want to try to have every genre represented
Mm.
in some way. Having choices in the eventual top game of all time. And I don't know if we'll ever get any sports games in any real way. I think that's going to be the hardest one to try to
Maybe
get in here.
GameCube might get a sports game.
Maybe like outside of like maybe a Mario sports game
we
might
will. Wii
make
Sports
it.
is going to be on there.
Wii Sports, but yeah, Wii Sports, the true representation of the sports genre.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody agrees with that. Yeah, it's a weird thing, but I you try. But hey, we're definitely gonna get some fighters with and hopefully some like-in games with the arcade. But yeah, however, we are not doing 90s arcade next. That's going to be a little ways until we reach that point. Just because I want to try to mix it up as much as possible while still following the timeline a bit. No, instead, next time we get to talk about the top 10 Dreamcast games of all time. Our final Sega console.
Yep. If you can't think of Dreamcast games, we've got a video about the Dreamcast. There's a bunch of them in, so that might refresh your memory.
Yeah. I never owned a Dreamcast, but I've played a bunch of Dreamcast games, and there's some solid ones on there.
Yeah.
Like, Dreamcast is one of those systems like I kind of wish I had it when it came out.
Yep. It's one of those libraries which isn't like vast, but there's so many all-time greats in there.
It's kind of N64 in that way.
Yeah, it's more vast than you'd think it would be for a console that was basically here for like a year and a half in the West.
Yeah. That being said, I'll be shocked if Sonic Adventure 2 is number one. Isn't number one. I'll just put it out there right now.
Adventure 1's also kind of a battle with Adventure 2. I don't know. I don't know what the masses prefer. It's probably Adventure 2 these days, but there's always that argument about which is better. But I don't know. People might put Crazy Taxi at number one. You never know.
Could make it. Maybe these Skies of Arcadia fans will come out in droves.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll be shocked if like Soul Calibur doesn't make it. And honestly, some fighting games could really make it because a lot of Dreamcast is like the best place for a lot of fighting games back in the.
You got Street Fighter 3, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, Soul Calibur, like you said, Power Stone. You do a top 10 on just fighting games alone.
Oh, easily.
Yeah,
easily. So yeah, we'll have to see what actually we'll have to see what actually wins that one. That should be a lot of fun. But yeah, this was the 80s arcade. Thank you all so much for listening. And what do you think of the top 10? I'm curious how you feel how this all turned out. But for otherwise, that covers it for our top 10 80s arcade games of all time. So thank you so much for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/tvgaming. But even just subscribing to the channel and ringing that bell helps us a ton. So until next time, for the Dreamcast, bye.